of course, a lot of them are saying the mental health is the issue. Okay, well, why? That might be true. He might be insane. Why was he let out many times over so he could stab white people in the neck?
A Democrat judge who I will add was a strong supporter of former Vice President Kamala Harris.
Of course she was.
Released this insane criminal once again without requiring him to pay any bail.
We cannot allow a depraved criminal element of violent repeat offenders to continue spreading destruction and death throughout our country. We have to respond with force and strength. We have to be vicious just like they are.
The media cover-up continues. They're now saying this is not really a race issue, and everybody who's noticing the murder of Irina Zarutska should just chill out, stop being such a bigot, and more. But new video is coming out of the attack that happened on the metro, and we're not going to play it because YouTube will probably flag us, and then we won't be able to get into the rest of the content here today. But here is the video. The full thing's on YouTube, and I would encourage you to watch it because this is the aftermath of what happened. And what happens in this 14-second clip is he's just done stabbing her in the neck multiple times. So he's going to throw her head to the side, and then she's going to basically bleed out. Everybody else in the back of the bus is going to get up and go to the front of the bus, and she's just going to kind of fall to the ground and then bleed out very slowly. Now, there's a battle about kind of what happens next, right? The video, you can say that she lies there for 30 seconds, a minute before somebody comes up and helps, and people are walking around as the murderer has just blood dripping down the blade and down his hand because he probably cut himself in his vicious, monstrous attack. Clay Martin, you know him. He's the author of The Wrath of Wendigo. He says, this can be the face that launches 1,000 ships, or this can be the moment Western civilization went terminal and suicidal. There you go. May she rest in peace. And I think he's right, because this is happening over and over. We can't talk about it unless you're called a bigot or a racist or something like that. And now people have noticed long enough, and there's a lot of fatigue setting in, that we can't talk about this when you have got other judges who are releasing these people in contravention to the law, or what the law should be. Now they're calling it being compassionate or whatever for vicious criminals in America. It's sick. So we also then see Charlie Kirk is calling out Van Jones on this because, of course, a lot of people don't want this to be about race, especially when it's devastating for their race if we start talking about it. Charlie Kirk said, hey, Van Jones, you still think this attack on Irina Zarutska had nothing to do with race? You can hear the audio right here from the murderer himself. So if she was a black girl, do you think he would have sliced her neck open multiple times and let her bleed out there? I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. But white girl definitely got it. And I think there's a racial component since he's calling it out specifically. She didn't do anything to him. He was just sitting there. He didn't like a white girl sitting right in front of him, so he killed her. Now, Politico is disgusting. So they continue this. They say, a Ukrainian refugee killed in North Carolina gets dragged into a political messaging war. Yeah, she got dragged into the dude's knife by his hand and the knife. That's what happened. And if this was anything else, like if this was obviously reverse, you can do that game all day. You can say, well, what if it's a white guy killing a black woman or something like that, and then said, I got that black girl. What if that happened? Do you think that there would be a national outrage about that? Of course. They burned down cities all over 2020 in the summer, and there was no even evidence of any racial motivation to that at all. George Floyd was committing a crime, and they came and investigated him. He was getting arrested for it. And he probably took a pill at the last minute, which we saw on the trial. He had a pill on his tongue. They showed us. So they posted this. This came over from some intern over here, Jacob Wendler, and he says she's now getting dragged into this, whereas they made a non-existent race issue into a national crisis for months because they wanted to win an election, and this is just not convenient for them. So they posted that. Now, the FBI says, we have been looking into this from the beginning. We've been investigating the train murder from day one, so stay tuned, and we have arrived. We've got now the actual announcement of federal charges for the murderer, DeCarlos DeJuan Brown. They say a federal criminal complaint was filed in the U.S. District Court in Charlotte today, charging DeCarlos DeJuan Brown Jr., age 34, with a federal crime in connection with the fatal attack of Irina on the city's light rail system. Brown is charged with one count of committing an act causing death on a mass transportation system. We had this from Pam Bondi. She posted, she says, Irina Zarutska was a young woman living the American dream. Her horrific murder is a direct result of failed soft-on crime policies that put criminals before innocent people. I have directed my attorneys to federally prosecute DeCarlos, a repeat violent offender with a history of violent crime, for murder. The brutal attack on Irina, said Cash, was a disgraceful act, here you go, that should have never happened in America, or should never happen in America, which is a little bit different than it should have never happened. He should have been in custody. He already had armed robberies and other things. The FBI jumped in to assist the investigation to ensure that he's never released from jail to kill again. I want to thank Pam Bondi for her pursuit of the federal charges today, because this is a first step towards delivering justice for Irina and her family, as well as the millions of Americans who deserve to live in our great American cities free from being targeted by violent criminals, or racist attacks against white people. On August 22nd, approximately 9:55, officers with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department responded to a call for service, but another quote from the U.S. Attorney, the brutal attack on an innocent woman simply trying to get to her destination is an attack on the American way of life. And of course, crimes like this affect the victim the most. Irina deserves justice, and we will bring justice to her and her family, but crimes like this also affect everyone else who relies on mass transportation. Yeah, you're definitely not sitting on the back of the bus if there's a big group of black people there and you're a white girl. I mean, now you're thinking twice about that, I would imagine. Says Irina, and will bring justice to her and her family. But crimes like this also affect everyone. If convicted, Brown faces a maximum statutory sentence of life in prison, and now he's been charged. So I've got all the documents queued up here at the federal and the state level. Let's dive into the criminal complaint, and you can see here is what he's been charged with: a terrorist attack or other violence against the mass transportation system. August 22nd, this story's, kind of old actually, is when the murder happened, and it's now just capturing attention because people are outraged about it. But the affidavit has been submitted here. So I, Cameron Winchester, am special agent with the FBI. I've been a special agent since 2022, assigned to FBI Charlotte. Now, since becoming a special agent, I've investigated a bunch of stuff: criminal, street gangs, trafficking, and prior to joining, I was a parole and probation officer. I supervised a gang caseload, and I've done a bunch. Now, the affidavit is presented in support of charging DeCarlos DeJuan Brown Jr. with violence against the mass transportation system. And the affidavit contains what is necessary for probable cause, but it's not everything I know. Standard introduction from the FBI. Now, based on my training and experience, I know that the Charlotte area transit system is the largest transit system between Atlanta and Washington, D.C., with multiple local, express, and regional bus routes, as well as a light rail service called the Lynx Blue Line. Now, this makes it federal because now we're crossing state lines, right? From Atlanta to D.C., it happened on this service. The service operates in interstate commerce, federal jurisdiction. The Lynx Blue Line has 26 stations spanning 19 miles, with a northern terminus at this location, and it ends over there. And there's regular mass transportation that goes on there. This guy, DeCarlos, is a 34-year-old man who resided in Charlotte, North Carolina. And then on August 22nd at 21:55 hours, officers received a call for service related to assault with a deadly weapon on the Blue Line. They went there. Comments from the 911 call advised a woman had been stabbed by a black male wearing a black shirt, light blue jeans, and an orange hooded sweatshirt. Pretty good description on that. Officers responded to the scene and arrested Brown. He was on the outbound Lynx Blue Line, located at the same station as the call for service. They also located a folding pocket knife near the outbound light rail platform. At the time of his arrest, his clothing matched the suspect's description given on the 911 call. Now, additionally, Brown had a laceration in his right hand. He was arrested and then transported to the Atrium Main Hospital to be treated. Now, CMBP located the victim in the rear car of the CATS train at the inbound platform. The victim, subsequently identified as Irina, IZ, was laying on her back, deceased. She was dead, next to a large amount of blood, with a single stab wound in the middle of her neck and a small cut to her left knee, with her arms by her side, her legs extended out. The victim, Irina, was wearing a black t-shirt, khaki pants, and black Nike shoes. Crime investigators responded to the scene, collected a pocket knife, which was covered in her blood, in suspected blood, in addition to a red shirt soaked in suspected blood. The police also collected swabs from the suspected blood on the platform and buccal, hand, and fingernail swabs from the victim. They also collected other items in the victim's person and in the seat where the victim sat prior to the attack, swab, and everything. They then got surveillance footage from inside the light rail. At 21:46, the victim can be seen entering the light rail car, 21 hours and 46 minutes. So you could start the clock. So like Dave Chappelle could start the stopwatch and he could say, okay, so for how many minutes this guy walked, this guy stopped, this guy was hunting his prey, this guy was plotting his murder for 12 minutes and 45 seconds, whatever. Okay, waiting for that one. At approximately 21:50, Brown pulled a knife. So how long is this? 4 minutes. He sat there plotting. He pulled a knife from his pocket and unfolded the knife before striking the victim 3 times from behind, hacked her to bits. Now, following the attack, fact, suspect blood can be seen dripping on the floor as Brown walked away from the victim there. Based on the information, we request the issuance of a criminal complaint against this dude, and we'll see if he gets indicted later. Based on my training and experience, writes Special Agent Cameron, and the facts, I submit that there's probable cause that this guy did knowingly and without lawful authority commit an act, including the use of a dangerous weapon with the intent to cause death and serious bodily injury on persons on a mass transportation vehicle, which was carrying passengers, and there you go, engaged in interstate commerce. So I was asking myself, what are the feds going to charge him with? And here it is. I request the court issue a criminal complaint and arrest warrant that has happened, signed off on by the judge. You can see here's what we've got. The warrant for the arrest, they've got his photo up there so that they can go capture this dude. They basically had him in custody anyways, but 1 count murder. Date of the offense, 8/22/2025, Mecklenburg County, DeCarlos DeJuan Brown Jr. He is, according to them, homeless. Okay, so no address for him. So just let him out, run the streets so he can just stab people in the neck. Now, on or about the date of the offense shown, DeCarlos unlawfully, willfully, and feloniously did of malice aforethought, which is the key phrase for murder, actually intentionally thought about it, and murdered her, pulled out his knife, and killed her. So the other offenses obviously not going to be listed in here, so we don't need to see those. And this is just the rest of kind of the paperwork, if a hearing would have happened, or a trial, it looks like. So very quick warrant for the arrest. Then we get the affidavit. Now, this was submitted by local state police. So this came out from the Charlotte cops in an affidavit saying, DeCarlos Brown, homeless, race African-American, born 1990, age 34. Did he make any statements to the police? Not answered. Is the defendant to who and what did he say? Nothing there on that. When did the incident occur? 2155. Irina Zarutska is here. She got medical attention. She is now deceased. She's from unknown relationship, didn't have any, happened to be white. Have victim and the defendant ever lived together? No. Does it involve domestic violence? No. Is the victim willing to prosecute? Yeah. Has the victim been prosecuted, the defendant, before? No. Now, what evidence did they gather? Knife, swabs, video, clothing, no other names, no restitution, no credit card frauds, nothing else here of note. No witness names collected. So we don't have any witness names there collected either. Then we finally get the reason for the arrest and the very short affidavit. So it's on August 22nd at approximately 21:55, Central Division officers received an assault with a deadly weapon call. The call comments included that a female was just stabbed in the throat by a black male wearing a black shirt, light blue jeans, and an orange hoodie. Officers responded to the scene and were directed by witnesses to the location of the defendant, DeCarlos DeJuan Brown, who was on the outbound light rail platform. The defendant was wearing the same clothing as described by the 911 callers, had a laceration on the outside of his right hand, was also arrested and transported to the hospital for treatment. A folding knife was located near the outbound platform. The victim was located in the rear car of the train. She was pronounced deceased at 22:05. The victim sustained a stabbed wound to the middle of her throat. Detectives obtained the video from inside the train car. The video is clear and of ID quality. The victim enters the train car and sits in the seats directly in front of the defendant, the murderer. The train travels for approximately 4.5 minutes before he pulls a knife from his pocket, unfolds the knife, pauses, stands up, and strikes her 3 times. 4.5 minutes. He sat there and stalked her. Blood visibly drips on the floor as he walks away from the victim. The victim goes unresponsive shortly after the attack. The defendant is the assailant in the video. There appears to be no interaction between the victim and the defendant, and detectives are seeking a charge for murder. Judge signed off on it. The detective is H.K. Burr Jr., and be curious to know more about that dude. But here you can see is more. So now we've got the conditions of release to see if he'll get out. It's murder, so he's likely going to be non-bondable. We'll see what the doc says. But conditions of release and the release order. So he now has an arrest warrant. He's now been arrested. He's brought in, and they are giving him an order. The judge is hearing him and holding him in custody, essentially, right? So the defendant named above, you're ordered to appear. You got to come back here on the 19th of September at 1:30 p.m. for another court date. Now, at this time, your release is not authorized. And I think they're going to modify this document here in the next document, but the defendant is required. You got to give fingerprints, DNA sample, and nothing else is checked off there. He's in confinement to the custodian. Bring him back here at 10 a.m. for his court date. This was before the 29th. So he's got a 29th date, and it sounds like a September 19th date. No conditions of release because he's not being released, and nothing really logged there. But there was an updated conditions of release and release order. And you can see in this one, they made this notation here. No bond set pursuant to North Carolina law. So they updated this. They said, there's no bond. Okay, murder charges, we're not letting you out. You're too dangerous. And this guy should have not been out, left out before because he's got got multiple crimes as we articulated. So that is the arrest warrant. Here is questions about his counsel. So the court completes this form to determine if he needs an attorney appointed to him. And I don't see anything on this document signed at all, or any boxes checked. This court completes this form when a case is declared capital, and it sounds like the judge is just signing off on this order, saying he's going to get an attorney. Capital notice, it's a capital, so, they're probably going to be seeking the death penalty, it sounds like, first-degree murder. So he didn't check anything on those boxes, which is a little, you could have just said he's charged with first-degree murder. Like, why is that box not checked? I pulled these right from the court, and why is that not checked? I don't know. So that's there. We also then saw this, which is interesting. We've got a redaction on this. Here was the motion on a mental competency exam. Okay, so they'll submit this guy, commit him to the regional hospital over for an examination on his capacity to proceed. And what we'll see in cases like this is they'll go see usually a group of psychiatrists or psychologists or court-appointed people, and they'll do an evaluation. Here, they explain some of it here. In felony cases, a local examination must be ordered before an examination at the hospital. If the court finds that a local impartial medical expert or forensic evaluator who is certified is appropriate, is available and appropriate. Okay, so try to do it locally before you ship them out. To order a local examination, reach out here, use the form and submit it, and we'll do it. Now, the address for the hospital is over there. And so what'll happen will be, you'll have three possible, maybe psychiatrists who will interview or analyze somebody. First one comes out and says, this dude is insane. Okay, he has no competency to stand trial. Then the next one comes out and says, no, that first doctor's wrong. He can stand trial. He's perfectly competent. He's just a little crazy, but not insane. Like, you can be a little bit crazy, but not insane. You're competent to suffer the consequences of your actions. And if you have that split, then you go to the third mediator to break the tie. But as it stands, we'll see what happens. So they submitted a motion. We don't know what was written back behind here, but it was submitted by the defendant's attorney, who was appointed, also notifying the district attorney over there, Mr. Bill Bunting. And yes, the judge finds the following. The case was heard before the judge. They argued the motion, and the court finds that the defendant's capacity to proceed is in question. He's charged with a felony, and so an examination would be more appropriate at the major center, Central Regional Hospital. That's better over a local evaluation. Saying, so I'm ordering him, we're going to skip the local stuff. He's going to get shipped over to this hospital. They're going to analyze him for observation and treatment for 60 days to determine his capacity to proceed. The moving party shall provide the hospital with a copy of this order, his charging documents. The regional hospital must direct a written report describing the present state of his mental health to the defense attorney and back to the court. The sheriff of the county shall transfer them over to this hospital and shall return them back to the jail once the evaluation is completed. So he'll be over there who knows how long, probably nice and comfy. Upon presentation of a copy of this order, any physician or anybody authorized can furnish copies of all records about everything related to this dude concerning his forensic evaluator and more. And upon request, you can provide documents. The court is saying turn them over and we'll review them. So the defendant's attorney, he's got an attorney, Daniel P. Roberts, probably assigned, and they'll process him for a medical evaluation, and we'll see. And the dude might be insane, so might just not be competent for trial, and then you can't force him to stand trial because punishing an insane person is not apparently allowed in America. So here's another one. Judgment, order, or other disposition. The defense was moving the court to order the virtual appearance of the defendant in order for the court to conduct first appearance procedures. So now he's being shifted out to the hospitals, so we'll let him appear. The order to the sheriff, allow him to appear virtually for 8/29. That has already come and passed. And so those are the documents. And we see that they, on the other side, BLMers, according to PJ Media, they launched a bunch of GoFundMes, in fact. We saw the video, but the first fundraiser has been deleted. Somebody said we were raising money to assist with legal fees to fight against racism and bias against our people. The original GoFundMe was archived over here. Let's take a look at it and see what we've got. They archived it right here. The original GoFundMe has now been deleted. $10,000 goal. Raising money to assist with legal fees for DeCarlos. Anything helps fight against racism and bias against our people. Thank you for giving us a hand in pushing against this corrupt narrative, says somebody. So I don't know who made that, but another one was also archived and deleted, and people are taking screenshots of it. Ezekiel Rivers was organizing that one. Legal fees. And of course, a lot of them are saying the mental health is the issue. Okay, well, why? That might be true. He might be insane. Why was he let out many times over so he could stab white people in the neck? GoFundMe's terms of service explicitly prohibit fundraisers that raise money for the legal defense of anyone charged with an alleged violent crime. So they canceled those. Consistent with this longstanding policy, these have been removed. And what also happened is the Charlotte mayor, okay, the lady who is running the place, she was very excited that the media media partners would not air the video because it's really devastating for her race. And so here is what they said over here from QC News, saying, "I'm heartbroken. The mayor responds to the disturbing video." Now, because the video is so disturbing and violent, Queen City News is not going to show it, but the video is horrific. Brown sits for about 4.5 minutes being stalked. No idea what's coming, and then she gets stabbed. Now, the mayor, in a statement posted Saturday, said, "The video of the heartbreaking attack that took Arena's life is now public. I want to thank our media partners and community members who have chosen not to repost or share the footage out of respect for her family." Yeah, we got it. Like so many of you, I'm heartbroken. And why is the media kowtowing to the mayor? Media partners who just do what she says? Like many of you, I'm heartbroken, blah, blah, blah. You people have created these environments in your crap cities. When it happened, of course, I was very disturbed and I was like, I don't know if I want to take the light rail, said one writer who didn't want her name to be used. Definitely. And you definitely don't want to have a black guy, at least in a hoodie, sitting behind you looking kind of suspicious. So like you take the back of the bus, 100% all the way at the back, so nobody's behind you. I have not noticed a change in security either. I've seen more absent, actually. I feel like I've noticed an increase in security, but only at specific times, like in the morning. And so, yeah, man, I'd be on high alert there if I was taking the metro, protecting your neck everywhere you go, because apparently there's insane people who will just slice it. Andy NGO, what's up, Andy? He posted this comment. He said, "By every metric, the killing of the young woman in Charlotte, North Carolina was more brutal than George Floyd's death. She was not a violent felon, nope, nor was she in the act of committing more crimes, like George Floyd was, when she suddenly found herself bleeding out on a train following a knife attack from behind. But politicians won't respond with urgency because they know those outraged won't kill, burn down neighborhoods, occupy entire areas, and rampage like everyone on the left did in 2020. And they were so proud of their riots that they said it made them immune from COVID, if you remember. Everybody had to be locked down unless you were fighting for racial justice. And then suddenly your T cells worked a lot better. Now, JD Vance says, "The big lie the Democrats told about violent crime is that it's systemic, and therefore no one is really responsible. If the system is to blame, then you fund a bunch of nonprofits that don't do anything besides give jobs to underqualified radicals like these people, like the judge who released him, who also is on the board of a nonprofit, who probably receives government money. The reality is that the gross majority of violent crime is committed by a very small group of people, and we should be throwing them in prison, not letting them out repeatedly." Now, we had more. The president and Caroline were both out. And let's start with Caroline and see what she had to say, because she started her press briefing coming out hot. And here's what it sounded like from the press briefing room.
Today, I would like to address the tragedy that has not received nearly enough media attention, the brutal murder of Irina Zarutska. Here are the facts that many outlets have shamefully and intentionally failed to report until President Trump drew attention to it. On August 22nd, Irina Zarutska was stabbed to death on the rail system in Charlotte, North Carolina by a savage career criminal. This is a public transportation system that many in the area use every single day to go to school and work. Irina was on the train that night traveling home from her job at a pizzeria, still in uniform from her shift. This beautiful, innocent 23-year-old young woman was a Ukrainian refugee who had recently fled her country for a chance at a safer life and a promising new beginning here in the United States of America. But tragically, a public transportation system in a major American city was more dangerous than the active war zone that she left. The president and the entire White House are praying for her family and friends during this unimaginably difficult time. But while we extend our thoughts and prayers, we must also seek justice for this crime and call attention to this heinous incident. Surveillance video of the killing was finally released to the public this past Friday. It shows the alleged killer, DeCarlos Brown Jr., pull out a knife, get up from his seat behind Irina, and prepare to thrust a blade into her neck before the released footage gets cut. This is pure evil on full display. The most enraging and unacceptable part of this story is that her death was entirely preventable. DeCarlos Brown never should have been on that train that night. In fact, he should have been behind bars. DeCarlos Brown has been charged with crimes no fewer than 14 times, dating back to 2011, including for armed robbery, felony larceny, breaking and entering, and shoplifting. Brown had previously served 5 years in prison for a robbery with a deadly weapon charge.
Crazy.
And he had also forfeited bonds 3 different times, twice in 2014 and once in 2023. Despite all of this past documented criminal history, when Brown was arrested yet again in January of this past year, a Democrat judge, who I will add was a strong supporter of former Vice President Kamala Harris,
of course she was,
released this insane criminal once again without requiring him him to pay any bail. He simply had to sign a written promise to return for his court hearing. Think about how crazy it is to ask a career criminal, someone who by definition repeatedly breaks the law, to just sign a written promise and come back again another day. This is madness. This monster should have been locked up, and Arena should still be alive. But Democrat politicians, liberal judges, and weak prosecutors would rather virtue signal than lock up criminals and protect their communities.
That's right.
And perhaps most shamefully of all, the majority of the media, many outlets in this room, decided that her murder was not worth reporting on originally because it does not fit a preferred narrative. Many of the journalists in this room spilled plenty of ink trying to smear Daniel Penny for defending a subway car from a deranged lunatic in New York City, but none of those same reporters lift a finger to write stories about an actual murderer.
Daniel was white.
Here's the truth that every American must know. Too many innocent people across the country continue to pay the price of the failed experiment known as cashless bail that has been championed by the Democrat Party for years. All the way back in 2020, North Carolina's then Democrat Governor Roy Cooper established a so-called task force for racial equity in criminal justice. Sounds nice, but it's not. That task force was co-authored by then Attorney General and current Democrat Governor Josh Stein. It recommended, quote, reimagining public safety to, quote, promote diversion and other alternatives to arrest. It also advised to de-emphasize some felony crimes, prioritize, quote, restorative justice, and eliminate cash bail. Democrats in North Carolina and nationwide are consumed with pushing a woke, soft-on-crime agenda, no matter how many innocent Americans suffer as a result. Instead of aggressively prosecuting and locking up violent criminals, the Democrat-backed cashless bail approach lets these criminals roam free in our country to offend again and again. These reckless policies have turned too many of American cities into hunting grounds for career criminals who mock our justice system, drain law enforcement resources, and wreak havoc on law-abiding citizens. Enough is enough, and that is why President Trump is doing everything in his power by taking action to undo these absurd policies. The president recently signed a powerful executive order directing the AG to submit a list of states and local jurisdictions with cashless bail policies so that the Trump administration may identify federal funds that are being provided to these states and can potentially be suspended or terminated. President Trump firmly believes that to maintain order in public safety, we must incarcerate individuals whose pending criminal charges or criminal history demonstrate a clear, ongoing risk to civil society. This is a common sense and sensible approach that the vast majority of Americans agree with, and it's time for the Democrat Party to get on board with what is right. When these criminals are caught, they must be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law and be sent to prison, where they can no longer terrorize our streets. This is the mandate the American people delivered to President Trump, and it's a mandate he intends to fulfill.
We'll see what happens in North Carolina. Now, here was the president responding to this, very unhappy about what has happened to Arena, and not just her, but as a symbol of very broken system in largely Democrat dumpsters. And as the president, he's got an obligation to protect the citizens. I mean, our government, if they're supposed to do anything at all, it's to help ensure we don't get stabbed in the neck.
For far too long, Americans have been forced to put up with Democrat-run cities that set loose savage, bloodthirsty criminals to prey on innocent people, really very, very innocent people. In every place, they control radical left judges, politicians, and activists, and they've adopted a policy of catch and release for thugs and killers. In Charlotte, North Carolina, we saw the results of these policies when a 23-year-old woman who came here from Ukraine met her bloody end on a public train. And here's a picture of it. And this is a picture of the woman, a beautiful young girl that never had problems in life, with a magnificent future in this country. And now she's dead. She was slaughtered by a deranged monster who was roaming free after 14 prior arrests. We cannot allow a depraved criminal element of violent repeat offenders to continue spreading destruction and death throughout our country. We have to respond with force and strength. We have to be vicious just like they are. It's the only thing they understand. 24 of the top 25 most dangerous cities in America are run by Democrat mayors. 50 people were murdered in Chicago in recent weeks, with hundreds being shot. And it's time to stop this madness. The people of our country need to insist on protection, safety, law, and order. We have proven that it can be done because we did it right here in D.C., in District of Columbia. The capital of America was a bloodthirsty, horrible, dangerous place, one of the worst. And now it's a crime-free city, and we're going to keep it that way. It can be done. It can happen fast. All we want is, please, Mr. President, we need help. Chicago needs help. Other cities needs help. We'll do what has to be done because we're going to make America safe again. And that includes our big cities. We're going to make those cities safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for bringing attention to this case and this matter from the Oval Office behind the resolute desk, saying, yeah, it is time to get vicious with these maniacs. Stop, being browbeaten by them into being called a bigot or a racist or something for demanding safety and security in your daily life.